Hello, welcome for joining us again for another session of Ask the Pastor. You're listening to Hope Radio 97.1 FM, and we are in a conversation about intergenerational ministry, talking about what the focus of the church should be regarding the generations. And really what we're getting into is the handoff of the faith from one generation to the next. And how does this happen? What can we do as a church to ensure that this is taking place? And with the knowledge that there's individual decisions that each generation has to make about where they stand with God, and then obviously the work of God and the Holy Spirit in the lives of people is it. But what can we do? So anyway, before we dive into this next session on this, introductions, I'm Jon Simpson out at Mitchell Berean Church, and I'm joined by my friends here.
I'm John Mulholland at WestWay Christian Church in Scottsbluff.
And I'm Kiley Callaway from Northfield Church in Gearing.
So we've been focused on how do we implement and how do we focus on really an emphasis on the family, with specifically encouraging, empowering, communicating that parents are the disciplers of their children, and that the church is a supplemental role, plays an encouraging role in that, but that the ministry the church does is to really enhance what parents are able to do. One of the things we're looking at as a church at Mitchell Berean is a curriculum that focuses in on this type of ministry, and it states it in this way, and it goes in. I don't have them all memorized, but the number of hours that a church has with a child, right? If we get them 1 hour a week, even if it's 2 hours a week, they come to Awana and to Sunday school, but versus parents, at the home, how many hours? And there's no comparison. So how do we encourage and build into our churches that model of ministry that says we aren't don't just give us your kids, we'll take care of it, but really we're trying to help you. And so we kind of started into some of the obstacles culturally and some of the obstacles as a church, but we're trying to press into, how do we implement it? And Pastor John said, well, we just have to do it, right? And that's true.
Yeah. I think the way to start is to just do it. And very quickly after that, this is not a magic bullet. I think the tendency for church leaders in this situation and the tendency for parents in this is what are the five things that if I just do at home every single day with my kids, I'm going to guarantee this outcome?
Yeah.
That is such a crazy Western American thought process.
Give me the formula.
Yeah, that's standardized testing, right?
Yeah. Right.
If we just give everyone this test, we're and we run them through the exact same educational process, we're going to get this out on the other end, and we know that doesn't work.
Right.
So I think what you said at the very beginning of this, knowing that human beings, I can do those five things, and that is not a guaranteed outcome.
Right.
That doesn't mean that I shouldn't hope and trust or shouldn't do those things. It just means that I'm responsible to be faithful to what God calls me to as a parent. And what God calls me to as a parent is to make disciples of my kids. Every effort, that's going to require time, effort, and energy on my part, regardless of what they may choose to do with the gospel that I hopefully have poured into my children. I still have a call. One of the things that someone said, several people said last week at the conference, it was one of those first night sayings. And you know what happens with those? They kind of just appear throughout the rest of the conference. He was talking about, fixing other people. He said, here's what you need to do. Draw a circle around yourself and fix everyone in that circle. I'm not responsible for the way my children respond to or don't respond to the gospel. I am 100% responsible to the way that I pour into them. And I think that really has import for us, just general discipleship, leaders as a church. It can be really easy for us, and I want to come back to intergenerational ministry. I feel like I want to just tell you guys this. I feel like I need to tell you this. Yeah. It can be really easy for us to be frustrated and disappointed when people don't respond in the way that we want them to. And like, I know what I'm wrestling with right now at my church, at WestWay. I'm not responsible for other people's obedience or disobedience.
Right.
I am responsible for the gospel, for pouring out the gospel into them.
Yeah.
And I think as parents, I think that can be, I would love for parents to hear that as an encouragement. That all I can do is what I can do, which is pour the gospel into my kids.
Right,
Yes.
and I think to that, we can add some encouragements.
Yes.
And so I think you're right. What is your responsibility? What is God calling you to do as a parent? Okay, it's to train, teach, impart Jesus and a relationship with Jesus and how to live for Jesus and all that training. And like I said, I think the church in ancient times gravitated towards kind of a guaranteed process where they could control it. Because the part of this that's hard is that God has made and requires that, in my view of Scripture, that every person has to make a decision for themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I can't control my kids. When I try to, I think, and when the church tries to control the process of salvation, it turns into, well, we'll baptize you at birth and death, and you're
Right.
fine. You're guaranteed. You're saved and you're in heaven. I mean, that's I get that. I get the sentiment behind it. But that is to fail to understand, how it works, how the gospel works, and what God requires, and what He really is looking for. He doesn't look for that you did some certain things. He's looking for that you know Him and you have a relationship with Him and you love Him. And so, but I think some encouraging things in all this, that God actually created, when He created the human race, He created it in such a way that parents do have an incredible, unquestionable amount of influence on their children. In fact, I encourage parents, no matter what the other polls are on them, and no matter how they're responding to you, you're still the biggest influence. Don't doubt that. So whatever you do as a parent, if you are sincere in it and if you're working at it, your influence is beyond what you could measure. It's more than anything else. And so I kind of encourage, you have it set up here. God set it up to work. He does want your children, to know and love Him. And He has empowered you and set this thing up so that it almost, I don't want to say it's guaranteed because there's no guarantee, but boy, it's meant to work, and it does work. And so, that encouragement in that hey, even if, we have the story of the prodigal son. I know it's not teaching a lot of theology in there, but it is a story about what happens a lot of times,
Well, I was a prodigal son, and I think a lot of parents think that the Bible is all about behavior change from a kid. Like if I just teach them, they'll just be little angels. But one thing that I say is spirituality is hard to quantify until you go through something and you know it's there. And I think that's what we have to do, is we have to be found faithful, number one, that we've done our job. And the more we pour in, when that time comes that child is faced with a situation, I think the parents will have an aha moment that all of their effort and energy, now it's quantifiable. They went through this, like a Christian should, like somebody that loves God should. Yeah. And, all the effort that my parents put in, and I walked away. Well, the verse held true when I was older. I came back to it, and now, here I am, a pastor, and they always call and say how proud they are of me, but I always say how proud I am of you, that you never gave up and you continued to pour in. Yes. And I think that's what parents need to understand, is that you just do your part, you work it, just do it, like Mary said, whatever He says, just do it. I think that's where Nike got their slogan. Yeah. But I really believe that if you just do it as a church and as a family, in the end, God's going to work it all.
Well, and that's not just like the, my kids need to see me read my Bible. My kids need, it's not just those things. There was one of the speakers last week or a couple weeks ago now, I know where we are in this. One of the speakers at the D6 conference was talking about how they had seen a number of unchurched kids come to faith. So they started interacting with these, what was going on, what happened. And one of and the common thread was, when we were in the homes of our Christian friends and their parents, we saw their family demonstrating Christianity. And then one of the students said something like, I was having dinner in the home of my Christian friend one night, and the father looked at my friend, the son, and said, "Hey, this morning, I just want to let you know how sorry I am for the way I yelled at you. That was not about you. That was about me, and I want you to know that I'm sorry." And the non-Christian student told the speaker that was kind of interviewing him, he's like, "Who does that?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, where does that even come from?" So for us, I think not just reading the Bible, but are we interacting with our family members, with our children in a Christ-like way, in a way that demonstrates God's mercy and demonstrates God's grace? Because those are the things that kind of take. And we are, like, our parents, like, hear this, like, you are discipling your children into something. Yeah. Every single one of you you are discipling your kids. There's not a 2-year-old in Nebraska that cares anything about Nebraska Cornhuskers. The only reason they care about the Huskers is because you tell them to. It's because you orient your entire day in the fall around Nebraska Cornhusker football. Like, that's why they care about it. That's why they're fans of it. That's why it matters to them. And what would it be like for us to demonstrate, and like, this isn't some anti-sports thing.
No.
What would it
Huskers
be like for us to orient our lives in that same way, where we're discipling them around things that matter?
Well, what you're saying is, and I believe this is true, because the handoffs happen when it's important to the parents. That the hardcore Husker fans, their kids are almost 100% of the time hardcore Husker fans. Maybe not to the same level, but boy, they get it. Like, okay, maybe they leave home and they're not as avid, but a lot of times they are, because they can tell what matters. And again, God created the family in such a way that what the parents believe in gets handed off and impressed upon, and the kids pick it up. That's just how it's meant to work. And so again, if you're, I was asked recently, what is the difference? Kids that do make a decision at some point as adults to follow Jesus, what's the difference about the way they were raised? And I really do think it is the sincerity of the parents around following Jesus. If it's a Sunday thing, if it's we're Christians and it's all kind of just some behavioral stuff and some things we do as a tradition, that may be of value to kids, but they care really about the things that really matter, and they can tell if it really matters to you. And then I think it's almost a guarantee that kids are going to care about those things too.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, the ones that leave the faith is going opposite of that testimony at the conference, is they go to church, but they're hypocritical in the home.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest turnoff.
Well, a lot of parents in our world, and I've heard this, there's this message that has been inserted by the enemy, because this is his goal. Well, parents, you shouldn't influence your kids around faith. You don't, because you're going to make them bitter. You're going to embitter them by doing that. And certainly there's some as adults that grew up in a home where they felt that. Well, okay, I mean, I'm not saying there isn't anything to wanting not to embitter your children. I mean, it's biblical not to embitter them. But to influence them, okay, around what you sincerely care about, I mean, how ludicrous is it to say, oh, here's a big area of your life, this is a big area that's important to me, but I'm not going to pass that off to you. It's a message from the devil meant to push parents even further away from probably the most important thing that they have to do as parents, which, like we're saying, is to disciple their kids. So I hit that a lot. It's like, no, you're called to influencing them in this area. You care about what they're going to do as a career. You care about who they're going to date. And you care about a lot of things. Don't back off of caring about what they believe in and who they're connected to.
When you were talking, so we don't have a lot of time left.
Right.
So Psalm 78.
Yeah.
Verse 4. We will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord, about his power and his mighty wonders. What I would encourage, at some point I wrote in my Bible above by Psalm 78, failed family discipleship. I don't want this to be a downer, and I don't want to close with a downer.
Right.
I think reading and reflecting on Psalm 78 to see what failed family discipleship looks like could be the best possible thing for us.
Yeah. So I don't think it's a downer.
Read this, we can see what we're called to.
Yep.
We can embrace what we're called to.
Yeah.
because God is going to, like, something that I've said in the past is when your kid, like, whatever judgment looks like, when you and your kids, whatever that piece looks like, you are not going to be able to say, well, Kiley didn't disciple my kids
Right.
when they were in children's ministry. John didn't disciple my kids when they were in student ministry. John didn't disciple my, like, there is no point. Like, this is something that we as a church need to own. This is something we as parents and families need to own. And I would love for those who are watching, listening to this, to take a dive into Psalm 78 and see what it says about failed family discipleship.
Yep.
Ask God to call us to obedience, seek repentance while it may be found, and then just do it.
You work the word, and it'll work for you.
Right.
Good. Well, thanks. We're out of time, so thanks for joining us for another session of Ask the Pastor. You're listening to Hope Radio 97.1 FM. We hope that you have a great week and that God blesses you, and we look forward to the next time we get to join together.